Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Talk Pensions and Benefits UK. Katie Lassman joins me this week. Katie is a project manager in the pensions industry, been in the industry for quite a while now, but Katie's got a very interesting story because Katie secured a job during this pandemic. So the agenda for today, the talking points for today, all going to be around that. So Katie, thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you here. Hopefully you're feeling ready and raring to go to tell our audience all about your story and what a crazy year you've had.
Yes. Hopefully it will be of interest to some people.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I think obviously a lot of people are, through their own choice or not, find themselves looking for a new role. And Katie and I had a chat before I hit record about why I wanted to do a couple of episodes on securing a job during this pandemic. And I think the amount of people that I speak to that, in the nicest way, are perhaps a bit down, a bit deflated. Is it going to happen? Are they going to find something new? What's it going to be like finding something new and starting a new role within a new company remotely? So hopefully today is going to give some good insights into what you've experienced that goes alongside some of our other guests as well. So let's go back. Let's start at the beginning. Obviously, where you had been a project manager at Aon, but you decided to take some time out. That coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown. So casting our mind back to leaving Aon or about to leave Aon, what was going through your head in terms of, is this the right time? What kind of approach are you going to take to all of this?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the timing with me leaving Aon, that was the end of February. So other than the sort of first news stories coming out of China, really didn't have any inkling as to what was going to happen. So I was looking forward to a year, as you say, taking some time out, was looking to do some traveling September time, had been booking that. And my plan was not to search for work really until pretty much where we are now, to start a job sort of in Q3 of this year. So I started the first few weeks of my leave, was looking into volunteering opportunities and things that I would do to fill my time. And then probably 2 or 3 weeks into that, I sort of realised that we're going into lockdown. So I then started to assess, well, actually, should I be looking for work again now? Initially, I decided against that, because obviously no one knew sort of back in March how this was going to play out, how long it was going to last. So really the turning point came sort of May time, I think, where it was very unlikely that we would still be doing the travelling that we'd planned. So from that point of view, there didn't really seem to be any good reason to continue to stay on my career break. I wasn't able to do any of the voluntary work that I've been looking into because obviously everywhere was locked down. So that was probably the lowest point really for me, sort of getting to that and realising that the year that I had planned had pretty much gone out the window. So.
And remind me, and I think this is going to make me quite jealous, probably some of our audience quite jealous as well. What were your travelling plans? Where were you looking at going? What was on the agenda?
Yeah, so it was Canada for about 4 weeks, sort of through September basically. So travelling through predominantly the Western Canada and the Rockies. So that had all been booked. And so my first job, alongside looking for a new job, was contacting all of the companies and cancelling that. So again, that was the low point, I think, in this journey.
Yeah. Funny enough, my parents, they've retired. They're deciding to spend my inheritance traveling the world, and they had a trip to Hawaii. And again, similar situation. I think it was booked for August, September, and I think there was that hope in the back of their heads that there was going to be some kind of normality. They would be able to do it. And then I think they kept kind of clutching at that straw and it just wasn't happening. So, real shame that these amazing trips, and I've spoken to quite a few people that have had these amazing trips planned, and have had to cancel them. And funny enough, I remember you and I having this conversation, I think, way back when we first started talking, because Canada is number one on my bucket list. Canada 1, New Zealand 2. They're the two countries I desperately want to go to. So, okay, so this trip has had to be put to one side. It's time to find a new role. So what was your thinking? What was your approach in terms of the type of role and the type of role that you were after, and how you were going to go about securing that?
Yeah, it was quite tough because, again, I had been thinking that had things gone to plan, when I did start looking for another job, that maybe I'd like to do something different and move into a different industry. My background in project management, but the last couple of years I had been moving towards more sort of project management office type roles, and that was something I was really interested in, to see if I could sort of move more diagonally in that direction. So the first question was kind of, well, do I still try and focus on that, or do I, just carry on with the sort of jobs that I've had in the past, so project management and the pensions industry? I decided I'd do both, basically. And I was also kind of, particularly on the pension side, was thinking at fixed term contracts, just because then it gave me the flexibility that potentially there'd be another break point in the not so distant future to do the Canada trip, should things get back to normal anytime soon. So there were lots of different elements in terms of what's going to best suit my requirements for now, which again was very difficult because there was no easy way of knowing how long into the future things would start improving and getting back to normal.
Sure.
So yeah, I kind of went for, well, if there's anything out there that's of interest to me, or I feel that my skill set is matches, then that was the type of role that I started to apply for.
Sure. I was just about to ask, actually, that's a great point. I was going to ask, is there's still an objective to get to Canada then? It's just a pause on that plan. We're not throwing it away. You still want to go, and who knows, hopefully 2021, as of today, we're recording this on the 2nd of December. The vaccine has been approved. It can now be rolled out. So the goal is still to get to Canada at some point soon then. Yeah.
We're thinking maybe 2022, but yeah, we'll have to see what happens between now and then. I think one thing this has taught us is not to plan too far in advance.
No, you're not wrong there, Katie. I mean, gosh, yeah. You kind of, you want to plan in advance. You want to do all these crazy things, but you've got that in the back of your head, And I actually got an invite to one of my closest friends, his wedding in 2022. And even looking at the invite, it was like, is this going ahead? I mean, hopefully by then we'll be back to normal, and this can all be a distant memory, but you just don't know, do you? So,
no.
Okay, so that was the tactic, and it's a similar tactic that I would take, and on a previous episode, I actually talk about kind of what I would do if I was looking for a job, whether we're in a pandemic or no pandemic. But I think you make a great point insofar as understanding your skills, understanding what experience you've got, whether it's pensions, whether it's transferable, it's still project management, project delivery, stakeholder management. So let's look and keep an open mind and keep a broad kind of outlook in terms of what you're looking at. And it was actually LinkedIn that put you and I in touch. I think it was a job on LinkedIn that we had advertised that you ended up securing at Fidelity. So how was that in terms of applying for jobs, getting the interview, preparing for the interview, and then ultimately getting the job? What was that experience like looking back now?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is quite a common piece of advice, but I did sort of treat it as a bit of a job, and I set aside, at least a day a week where I would put in applications. So I signed up for like notifications on LinkedIn, based on my job experience and the roles I was looking for in my area, and also Indeed, as that's quite a good website that sort of amalgamates lots of job postings into one. So don't need to kind of be signed up to lots of different sites. So I would sort of review those, decide on which ones I thought were worth putting an application in for. I have to say, other than this opportunity that I was successful with, I did find that going through more generalist recruitment consultants, I didn't get a lot of response back. I had more luck where it was a direct application with a company. I had an interview for the University of Sheffield prior to secure the interview with Fidelity. It was interesting actually, because I saw the advert for the position at the Fidelity, and it was the first one that I've seen that I thought, well, I know I can do that job. I've got, you know, all the relevant skills and experience. It's a job that I've been doing for 10 years at Aon. So I felt very confident in putting that in, and actually all the other roles that I've been applying for, which were maybe slightly out of my sort of comfort zone in slightly different industries, mainly because they were the jobs that were available in my area. I'd spent a lot more time on the applications. A lot of them were application forms as opposed to CVs. So, you know, writing out personal statements. So, you know, they could take, you know, a good few hours to do and to work through. Whereas for the Fidelity opportunity, I literally uploaded my CV in response to the advert, and you got in touch with me within a couple of hours, I think, of me doing that. So from that point of view, it was incredibly easy in comparison to some. So I guess I would sort of say to people, if anybody's kind of going through that slog of the application forms, or, you know, submitting a CV to an agency and not hearing back, then, you know, there is the opposite. There are opportunities that come up that just kind of fit perfectly, and it's a really quick and easy process to get to the next step. So that's certainly what I found with this one.
Good. No, definitely. And I remember, you know, the CV landing, and yeah, we're like vultures, you know, good candidates in this industry are hard to come by. So I remember it landing in the inbox, and yeah, it was probably only a couple of hours, and you and I were on the phone and talking about the role and going through kind of your search and what you were after. And I think it's a fantastic point where speaking very openly, I don't see why so many firms insist on that kind of application process, you know, and then, you know, particularly, right, page one, fill in your personal details, page two, fill in your education, page three, upload your CV. Well, why did I have to do pages 1 and 2? Because all that information is on page 3, you know, and it's the same with kind of covering letters. You know, I'll be honest, I don't read them. Now, I know I'm just a recruiter and applying to specific businesses. That may be a key part of the process. That may be a mandatory part of the process. But every now and again, someone says the same to me. Oh, do you want a covering note? No, your CV speaks for itself. I'm the covering note. You know, if I'm doing my job properly, I should be the one summarizing those skills off the back of the conversation that we've had. But I know it can be so demoralizing, can't it? You know, that constant trudge of, oh, I've done this, and then you get an automated email back saying, oh, thanks, but no thanks. It is difficult. And did you experience that? Because we've just, in a way, we've almost painted a very kind of easy picture. But thinking about our audience, thinking about the people listening, did you have any kind of circumstances where you're sat there getting demoralized and thinking, oh, is this ever going to happen? Or were you kind of lucky enough that this will happen quite quickly?
It did happen quite quickly, but I think I probably applied for between 20 and 30 jobs. And a lot of those, they were just a dead end. You know, I was lucky if I got an acknowledgement email saying thanks but no thanks. As I said, I did sort of get to the interview stage for a couple of other roles. But yeah, there was definitely that, especially when you are spending so much time on the applications, to not sort of get anywhere. It was a disappointment. But then there were some of those roles that I was applying for because, you know, they ticked the boxes in terms of what I felt I could do, and, you know, were in the area where I lived. But, you know, I wasn't that bothered when I got the rejection, because ultimately they probably weren't the sort of jobs that I was looking for. But obviously when you're unemployed and you're needing to find work, or more relevant to my situation, you're in this situation where, you know, go into the future, the job market is going to be getting more and more uncertain. I just kind of felt the pressure that I wanted to get something secured, because who knows that in a few more months of lockdown, you know, how many firms are still going to be actively recruiting. So that was the real kind of pressure for me, just this worry that there wouldn't be roles into the future, and to get something secured as quickly as I could.
Sure. No, excellent point there. And I think that's probably been the most pleasing thing for us. You know, we've still been very, very busy. The market is still very busy for us. And I know I've said this to a lot of people, where it almost felt like word spread amongst all these big businesses that you can hire people remotely. You can conduct interviews via Zoom. It's not the end of the world. They're actually quite, I really like them. You know, I think they're a bit more relaxed, and, you know, if anything, they perhaps add that little personal touch where you see, you know, you can see the wallpaper that my wife picked out, which I'm still not sold on, but, you know, normally gets a comment, or you've got a bookshelf, or I've had cats walk over the screen, or kids gate crash. And, you know, there's a part of me that thinks my kids will gate crash any minute, you know, so it's been great to see the industry continue to be busy. And I hope that message, and the message that you've just shared there, Katie, you know, gives people that kind of optimism and that confidence that, you know, if you keep at it, you know, try and keep your chin up and keep going, and it will come about, you know.
I think the other really good positive thing for me, particularly with this role, was actually, I don't think if it wasn't for the pandemic that this role would have been available to me. And that's because I'm not based anywhere near the employer's offices. And I think because of the pandemic, and because of, like you say, people realizing that remote working, remote onboarding works for them. I know Fidelity prior to this hadn't really fully embraced remote working, but yet they put a job advert out, basically calling nationwide, and that the remote working would be an option, you know, not just during, but the other side of the pandemic. And so that was brilliant for me. It's something I always looked for. I had the opportunity to work from home in my previous job, and I wanted to keep that. And to be honest, certainly looking at job adverts, you know, before the pandemic, that was something that was very difficult to know. And yeah, to see this advert where they basically said, you know, it can be a remote role and you can be based anywhere. I don't think they would have advertised that if it hadn't been for the pandemic, and therefore, because of where I lived, this job wouldn't have been one I would ever have considered. So that for me was a positive, and I think there are more companies that are going to be flexible around that now as a result. So.
Definitely, and you've hit the nail on the head, you know, and I'll put it out there for everyone to hear. I think Fidelity have been one of the better firms that we've dealt with. I think they've embraced the video interviews, the flexible working, the working from home. You know, they seem to have really got it right in terms of onboarding people remotely as well. And yeah, you know, anyone that knows where Fidelity are in Surrey, it's quite a tough location to recruit for us, because, you know, it's not necessarily on a mainline, you know, rail network. You know, it's a particularly busy road, the A217. You know, it's a tough place for some people to get to if you don't live within a certain radius. All of a sudden, Fidelity looked at it, or it seemed like they looked at it quite pragmatically and thought, well, if we cast the net wider and we offer that flexibility, how many amazing people are we now going to entice into our organization? And so you can find people further afield that can add so much value, but working from home, or a lot of firms are trying to find that balance, you know, I'll, you know, come into the office maybe a couple of days a week once all this is over. And it really, really seems to be worth its weight in gold, because you get great people coming in. They're happy because they get flexibility. They've got a great, exciting new role, and you've hired someone that perhaps you wouldn't have hired prior to this. So I think you're totally right that's one of the main positive aspects that's come about from this pandemic. So there's not a lot, but it's definitely one of them. So okay, and then moving along this timeline, I feel like we are going on a bit of a timeline, and that wasn't my aim, but here we are. So you've got a job, and it's time to start. What's going through your head in terms of those weeks running up to the start date, starting those first couple of weeks, that induction? You know, what for you were you thinking of, and then what turned out to be really, really positive about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the sort of main thing was just the logistics of sort of thinking about that. So, IT equipment, how that gets to me, or, is it something that I have to, purchase in myself and that kind of thing. So it was obviously exchanging emails on that in the run up. But I mean, I guess the main thing that was just sort of completely surreal was not going anywhere for my first day, basically just coming to my spare room, having a contact of someone that I needed to call in order for my accounts and everything to be set up, but really just kind of not knowing what to expect, and just having the faith that there was going to be somebody at the end of the line that was expecting my call, and not that it was a sort of a complete figment of my imagination almost. That was how it felt, a little bit on the first day, but it all went really smoothly. I got all my login details and got up and running that morning, I think, and sent emails out to the people I'd been told to sort of contact, from my team, and linked in with them very quickly. And yeah, I mean, at Fidelity, everyone's been really welcoming. They're obviously aware that people are joining remotely. So the first few weeks were just spent setting up time with sort of key individuals, other members of the team, introducing ourselves, getting to know each other a little bit informally. And everybody's, been really willing and happy to do that. And that's been a really good aspect. I think embracing kind of video has really helped. I know in my previous role at Aon, we had all these facilities and we did so many meetings by conference call, but hardly anybody turned the video on. And that's something that I think the pandemic again has sort of changed the behaviour. So it makes such a difference if you can see somebody's face, even if it is over a video link, rather than just a voice on the phone. And like I say, what the majority of the people on all meetings, including internal meetings, people are using their videos. So I think that really just helps building that connection with people. The other thing that was really positive for me was that Fidelity actually had taken on quite a few people at the same time as me. Little bit did I know on my first day, but so we were all in the same boat. So we actually formed a little bit of a support group. So we had a team, a group chat going, and we sort of met for a virtual coffee break once a month, so we could kind of share problems that we were facing getting access to systems, or if somebody had sorted it or found a useful person, kind of sharing that information. So all the sort of stuff that you would have picked up around the office, we were sort of trying to get that from each other as a little group. So that's been really good, and I now feel like I know those individuals really well, as if we had sort of been in an office together. So
that's brilliant. I had heard that, because we had placed obviously a few people in the same team alongside yourself, and I did hear that there was a little bit of a coffee club going on, and like you say, a group chat. And I think that's brilliant. This spirit of we're all in it together. Rather than all of us kind of suffering in silence or struggling or feeling isolated or just trying to get by, everyone seems to have come together to find a way through it. And we're coming out, or hopefully coming out the other side, in so much stronger, whether it's the bond with our co-workers, whether it's, teamwork, whether it's people adapting to working from home. There's so much positivity around that. And it is great to hear that onboarding has gone, pretty much without a hitch. So, and I suppose you've been there now for quite a few months. So has it turned out to be what you expected? Has there been, regular kind of accurate communication in terms of what the plans are, what the objectives are? And I suppose that kind of feeling, that welcoming feeling, that hasn't diminished at all or anything like that, has it?
No, sort of continues to be a really positive experience in terms of, any interactions with colleagues. Fidelity have also been very kind of good all the way through at communicating what's happening in terms of people coming back into the office, and has sort of made it very clear that if people don't want to, then there's absolutely no pressure on people to return to the office. And that was one thing I was quite nervous of when I joined, because obviously we had come out of lockdown then, and I think pretty much as I joined was the point when Boris had started encouraging people to go back to offices.
Yep.
So I did have a bit of an anxiety that there might be an expectation for me to, be present in the office quite early on, which would involve me sort of having to stay over because of the distances involved, which I didn't personally feel that sort of comfortable with doing. But there's been absolutely no pressure whatsoever from Fidelity. Everybody's doing what suits them. If it suits them to go into the office, that's been an option for people. But for people like me, can continue to work remotely. And so that was something that was really helpful and positive for me to kind of hear in my first few weeks of joining.
Brilliant. No, it's excellent to hear. I think most people that we're talking to, I think it generally comes down to if you're happy, if you're engaged, and ultimately if you're doing the job and doing the job well, it doesn't really matter where you're doing it from. You know, within reason. You know, there's that flexibility out there, like you say, no pressure to come in and you know, be present physically, so long as the work's being done, like you just said. You know, the video technology. And that's a great point as well in terms of the face-to-face, because I'm missing meeting people. I love meeting people. It's one of the best parts of this job. But doing it via Zoom, you know, it's okay. I quite enjoy it. But there's been a few times where I think people haven't realized that we're doing this face-to-face, you know, so they turn their camera on when they see my camera on. And it really does help. You know, if you're having a meeting and you're just looking at a blank screen with someone's name on it, really not the same than if they actually turn on the camera and you can really kind of see them and start feeding off them. So yeah, no, it's a great point. It's really, really good to hear that it's going well for you, Katie. And then I suppose final point, and I think this is quite important to ask. We look at where you are now, you know, early December, role's going well. You're feeling positive about it, albeit you've missed out on the holiday of a lifetime, but hopefully not for too much longer. Looking back to how you were feeling back in kind of March, April time, what advice would you kind of almost give yourself? And by extension, what advice would you give to anyone that is looking and is feeling a bit demoralized? You know, what words of wisdom and of experience could you share with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, keep an open mind. I think if everything had gone to plan and I'd seen this role advertised when I'd come back from my trip of a lifetime to Canada, I probably wouldn't have applied for it. And actually, it's probably exceeded my expectations. And it's not just the kind of same role as I was doing at Aon. It's sort of going to be quite varied, and it is going to be moving into the opportunities of moving into the areas that I am more interested in. So that's been kind of a real positive. So I think, you know, if you focus on jobs where, you know, you really closely match the job specification and the requirements for that role, then you're, you know, more likely to be successful in getting an interview and getting a response and hopefully a position than, you know, just applying for anything that, you know, for me, you know, said project manager, but that's such a wide range of roles across different industries, etc., that not all of them, you know, I was suitable for. So, you know, be very targeted, but also, you know, be open-minded. And you don't know until you've had, you know, at least an interview, how you feel about, you know, that position in that company. And certainly the interviews that I had with Fidelity, they were very informal, talked about what I'd done, what they were looking for, and where I would fit in with that. And it was very much of finding the right role for what I was interested in and for what they needed. So again, that gave me the opportunity of actually being appointed into a slightly different role than what I applied for, which wasn't just a straight sort of vanilla project management role, which is what I was looking for, but I wouldn't have known that from the job advert. So I wouldn't have maybe applied for it, like I say, if I'd been on my original plan of looking for, you know, something outside of the pension industry and that little bit different. So.
Oh, I think that's a great point to end on. You know, I think it's something that I would definitely kind of suggest and recommend to anyone. You know your worth, know what your key skills are, your transferable skills are. And one thing that I find myself quite regularly kind of suggesting is if something looks good, maybe not perfect, but looks good, have a conversation. You know, I find myself saying, look, have a conversation with them. I say it to our clients and I'll say it to anyone that's looking for a role. You know, within reason, have a conversation, because there's something there that ticks the box, you know, whether it is a little bit different or it's a little bit of a different job title or whatever. it's worth having that conversation. If after that you then write it off, fine, you haven't lost anything. And it's the same approach that we take with the firms that we work with. You know, have a conversation with them. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We hold our hands up. You know, we're not going to waste your time. There's got to be something there, you know, but I'll stick my neck out and say there is something there with this, you know, with this match. And you'd be surprised how many times those conversations do lead to, you know, a placement, even if on paper it's not an obvious match. But once they start talking, you start sussing each other out, you start to realize, actually, this is what I want. This does sound really interesting. They sound like they can add value, and everyone's happy. Everyone wins. So I think that's a great point. So Katie, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. As I said to you before we hit record, you know, I feel like we're on a bit of a roll now. This is episode 8 or 9. So I've hit my stride, and it's great to have people like yourself on here with great stories to tell. And like I say, hopefully adds a bit of positivity and optimism to those listening that may not be feeling it right now. So thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And yeah, everyone listening, thank you for joining us as well. Until next time, see you again soon. Take care.